Got it. Okay, so this is welcome to ACT via Zoom number 7 for 2023. And I'm Carol Sullivan, the facilitator with Cindy Madigan, co-host, kind of running the show from behind the scenes there, not so much behind, really. And thank you for joining as close to 10 a.m. as possible. It makes editing a lot easier, but we may have figured that out. So maybe we can go ahead and have a little visiting at the beginning and then start the recording. That might make sense, right, Cindy? Yep, she's nodding yes. First, rename yourself with your city, your county, or your league so we can see where people are coming from. And then if you'd like to add your Indigenous lands information in the chat so that we are constantly reminded of those whose land we live and work and play on. And it's such a good thing to be reminded of that. I wasn't even aware of that really until actually Cindy Madigan, no, Cindy Black brought it to my attention. So in the email reminder for this week, a recording of last week's session, Understanding the Legislative Process, the link to the short but quick video that Laura Love's group provided for us. There's a sign up form for, I'm really quickly calling it PR via RCV affinity group, but it really has a much longer name, and Cindy will tell you what it is later. And then a list of the upcoming programs. Like next week, our own League Green Team is going to be here for information about climate and environmental issues, and they'll bring along with them legislative updates. Their information has import for all Washingtonians. So our program today is going to begin with 2 public service announcements of sorts. First, Sherry Dysart, our forest issue chair, is going to share with us urgent action alert from her area. And then Cindy Madigan is going to give us an invitation to join a special group. So Sherry, if you'd like to start sharing your screen, I'll get mine ready to share. Okay?
Will do. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah, it takes a minute to get, we know.
Okay, so are people able to see the screen now?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, as Carol said, my name is Sherry Dysart. I'm the issue chair for Forest with the League of Women Voters. And on the front page of this week's legislative newsletter, there are 3 action alerts, and one of them is from me. And I wanted to give you a little more information and tell you why I wanted you to sign in pro. So I have become aware that there is a lot of misinformation being circulated about this bill and its companion bill, which is Senate Bill 5688. Both bills are being supported by the League. I testified in support of the Senate bill last week, and tomorrow I'll be testifying in support of 1789. So that hearing is tomorrow, the 14th at 10:30 a.m. in front of the House Ag and Natural Resources Committee. Meanwhile, what I'm asking you all to do, and this is super, super important, please sign in pro for this bill. And why does that matter? Because if you were to go in right now and see who has signed in, you will find hundreds and hundreds of people have signed in con because they have been misled about the intention of this bill and how it will affect our public lands. And so I wanted to just kind of let you know that we're kind of swimming upstream, but your help is needed so we can let the legislators know there's a lot of people who are supporting this and understand its importance. And so my slide here is just kind of give you some really, really high level information about this bill, what it will do. It will authorize the Department of Natural Resources to access carbon offset ecosystem service markets. Phew, that's a lot of words. So it's a new revenue stream for Department of Natural Resources. And that revenue stream actually got created by our legislature when they passed the Climate Commitment Act in 2021. That was Senate Bill 5126. So this revenue stream has several components. One has to do with carbon offset marketing. And so now the DNR can take advantage of that private sector stream of funds through this legislative vehicle. So this is another way for the Department of Revenue to bring revenue, Department of Natural Resources to bring revenue to the trust beneficiaries. So this is not an intention to shut down the forest. That the Department of Natural Resources is very clear about their obligation to trust beneficiaries. And so this will be additional revenue for the beneficiaries, not a diminution of that. Working forest will continue to be harvested as working forest. So this will be another revenue stream. And along with this revenue stream will come private funds that will enable the DNR to expand acreage of working forest by purchasing lands that might be converted, like turned into a parking lot, for instance. And also this revenue could be used to restore forest lands because there are burned acreages that have not been replanted yet because we need funds to do that. This will be another source of funds to do that work. And also do afforestation, starting new forests where land has been degraded. So there are ways in which this is going to positively affect our public lands. And I just want to show you the allies who have testified also in pro for this bill. Washington Conservation Action, Nature Conservancy, the Swinomish Tribe, Tulalip Tribe, Clean and Prosperous Washington are resources. So those are a few, and I want you to understand there were others that are very understanding this bill and why it is important. And then the next slide, which, how do I do this? Let's see what happens here.
Oops. I think you just hit like page down or something, but it looks like you ended your slideshow.
Oh,
So go up. Yeah.
so go back. So the second slide, which I'm going to go back to here, is that sorry, I thought I knew how to do this.
Yeah, I think if you hit page down, it'll go to your next slide on your computer, I think.
Okay.
Maybe not.
Well, let me just, I guess I can just tell you, because the next slide is just the list of folks that are on the House Ag and Natural Resources Committee. And I wish I knew how to do this. Sorry, page down, page down. Let me try this. If you recognize these folks, they will be getting a message from you if you take this action as well. So my keyboard is
Sorry
not
about that. Maybe Cindy Black knows better how to get her slide to move forward.
Just try to click on it and see what happens. Just click on it.
Oh.
Okay, good. Thank you, Cindy.
In advanced. Magic. Okay, thank you, Zoom gremlins. Oh, so here are the list of the folks that are members of the House Agricultural and Natural Resources Committee. And so part two of taking the action alert, if you have a representative on this committee, a message will go to those folks as well. And so, and then you are more than welcome to call, make a phone call and say, hey, this is an important bill. And I know the league is supporting it. So I want you to know that I think it's important as well. And let's see, I guess I don't want, there's a lot going on here and I don't want to take up more time for folks. But if you have any quick questions, I'm willing to take those. I know that Carol's going to show you how simple it is to do this action. So I'm going to stop sharing here.
Okay, you stop sharing, then I can start sharing and we'll see how, see how
I-
this goes.
Just an FYI, I put the link in the chat where you can sign in pro automatically.
Okay, oh, good. And here it is. I am not finding this from the same place. I was hoping to look in my email, but my email would not, my computer was not going to cooperate, but I think this will do it. So if I click on this, let's see if it does. And it goes to, my gosh, look at that. I am screen sharing. So there you can see I'm ready to do this right now. And it says next over here down in the right-hand corner. Next, and I know Deborah has her hand up at just a minute. Oh, this is going to go just to Shelley Kloba. So I am not going to take the time right now to do this because I want to reward it myself. And let's see if I can actually go back and do the other one because sign in pro. So I thought it was going to ask the whole committee.
Yeah, we're learning about that process here at the League. We have to type it in individually if it goes to all the committee members. So we're going to talk more about that on Thursday at Lobby Team.
Okay,
It's
so
not easy with every action to do that, but
here's the easy one. So look, Sherry's got it all set up and I can just sign in so easily because I've got that autofill. And I wish I could tell you how to do that. I honestly don't know. I've done it for so long and it's done. And the other one would be a little more complicated because I want to reword it. I'm just going to ask my representative who is on that committee to go ahead with that. So it's super simple. We're really trying to make it easy for people to participate. And it's not so easy for us to learn how to make it easy for you, but we're working on it.
Working on it.
New
Yeah.
setup, whatever. Thank you so much, Sherry. And I hope other people will respond. Go back in your email, look for the legislative newsletter and then do it yourself. Deborah, do you have a quick question for Sherry?
Well, I hope it's quick. Maybe Sherry could give us a brief idea of what the arguments against this bill are.
Can very, very nutshell that the timber industry is sending out mass emails to folks saying that this is going to shut down the working forest and the mills will close and hundreds of people lose their jobs. So it's in a nutshell, they're saying this is a plot by the DNR to shut down working forests. And so they're using the real effective scare tactics. You're going to lose your job, the mills will shut down, etc. And I can 100% assure you, the Department of Natural Resources is very, very clear about their fiduciary responsibility as the manager of the trust lands. And so it's unfortunate that this sort of misinformation is being circulated because it's just totally untrue. And this is actually a way to benefit folks in the rural communities in particular, because we will be adding working forests, not taking them away. So so does that make sense?
Yes, and
okay.
it seems to me that it would be important in people's comments to say that a lot of people are against it due to misinformation about the effect on working forests.
Yes.
Good idea. Your question was a good one, Deborah. Thank you so much. And Cindy, and thank you, Sherry, for bringing this to our attention, because as you say, we need to be signing in pro for this. So Cindy, you want to go ahead with your little invitation?
yes.
Cindy.
Yes, thank you, Carol. Yes, so yes, the League on our democracy team, we are working in parallel for democracy reforms. Redistricting is one, public funding of elections is the other. Cindy Black will talk about that later. Next. And then the third one is proportional representation through ranked choice voting. So we are starting an affinity group, which is going to meet on the second Thursday of each month. So our next meeting is on March 9th. I put it in the chat from 5 to 6:30. There's a sign-up sheet, a link to the sign-up sheet. If you could sign up, we're looking for people who want to participate in those meetings and possibly join the steering committee to help develop the programming and reach out to guest speakers. Our goal is to have speakers from across the country, League members and also election administrators who have gone through this process so that we can learn the best practices for education and advocacy around this goal. And so we will be putting something up on the state website under the affinity group title, and it will include this sign-up sheet and the link to the program that we had during Democracy Lobby Week with the person from Portland who talked to us a lot about what the Portland League, how they contributed to the success of the ballot measure and their plans for voter education. So thank you very much, Carol, for this chance to speak about that. And please do consider signing up to join our group.
It would give you a way to be in on kind of the ground floor of something that's going to become legislation, we hope, in the very near future. Well, now it's really time for the other Cindy. Cindy Black has been the executive director of Fixed Democracy First since 2016. She was also the campaign director for Washington Men's successful statewide ballot initiative number 735 campaign that made Washington the 18th state to call for a U.S. congressional constitutional amendment to end court decisions like Citizens United. She's really active with several state and national coalitions, and she's definitely committed to helping pass pro-democracy legislation locally and nationally. And if you were to visit, actually, I want you to visit Fixed Democracy First website and then register for the weekly 5 p.m. Democracy Happy Hour, because that's where Cindy brings in one spot news and information about democracy issues. And it makes it so easy to be current on things that are happening across the nation. She's my definite go-to news source for democracy issues. She also each week presents one topic for discussion, and there's often lively discussion. Best of all, she sends a follow-up email with all the links to articles that she mentions so that you can dig deeper if you want to. She's a really active partner with the League, and we have so much to thank her for the success of Democracy Lobby Week last week. And what all of this doesn't say is that in her past, she was an Air Force veteran, or she is an Air Force veteran because of her past commitment to service. And I like to distinguish her from the other Cindy Madigan in our democracy team, because I like to call her Sarge. So thank you for being here this morning, Sarge, and let's learn about democracy vouchers.
Thanks for that intro, Carol. I didn't expect that. So I'm going to jump right in because there's a couple of things that Carol asked me to talk about today. One is the voucher program here in the state that we're moving on, and our new People Powered Elections Washington Coalition. And then I'm also going to give you an update on the Moore v. Harper case and give you a quick overview of what this case is about and what we can expect from that. But first, I'm going to start with the voucher program. Some of you might have attended the session last Wednesday when I went over this, so some of this might be repetitive, but I do have a few updates on it. But I am going to go through this quickly, just give you an overview about public funding of elections, why we want public funding of elections, why in particular a voucher type program, then where we are now in the state and where we hope to get. So I'm going to cover types of public funding, why public funding of elections, the history, a little bit of that of public funding in Washington State, including the Seattle voucher program and initiative that was back in 2016, 1464, who's currently using public funding in the country and what's next here in Washington State. There are three kinds of public funding that are commonly used. One is small donor matching programs, grant-based programs, and then voucher type programs. So small donor matching is when programs that match small contributions to qualifying candidates. So for example, if I give $100 to a candidate, a matching program might be as high as up to 6 to 1. Oftentimes it's not that much. It could be 2 to 1, 4 to 1. So if I give $100 out of this program, they can get up to maybe $600 in addition to those small donations. So it just multiplies those small donations. Then another program is a grant-based program, often referred to as like clean elections, fair elections, things like that. They provide full funding for candidates to run their campaigns, so they don't have to fundraise at all. So there's usually very limited money. Once that grant is gone, that's all they can do, but oftentimes they can't fundraise any further than that. So they're limited to whatever that grant might be. And then there's a voucher program, which is sort of like a coupon that individuals qualifying legal residents can give to participating candidates of their choice. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And often there's a lot of limits and things that candidates have to agree to in order to participate in any one of these type of programs. So why do we want to empower small donors and campaigns? Well, I think this cartoon illustrates that with decisions like Citizens United, the McCutcheon decision, and all the way back to the late 1800s, and decisions along the way have given a lot of power to special interest corporation and wealthy people to give unlimited amounts of money in election, drowning out the voices of average people like ourselves. So some of the benefits, and I'm going to in particular talk about small donor and voucher type programs. I'm not going to focus on grant programs, which tends to be the least popular. The most popular is usually small donor matching, but democracy voucher type programs are gaining a lot of steam and a lot of interest in many places across the country. So a program like this can promote more competitive races, which opens the door for a lot more people to run for office. So it fosters diversity in the electoral process. What we found in the past is if you don't have friends and allies with deep pockets, it's very difficult to run for office and win because you just don't have the money to do that. What these type of programs do is it allows people that normally couldn't run for office, gives them the opportunity to do that. In particular, women, lower income, communities of color, and so forth, younger candidates and so forth that normally could not run for election. This enables them to run and actually win elections. It also encourages voter-centered campaigns. And what that means is that candidates actually have to talk to their constituents on a more intimate basis than they would in regular campaigns where they're mostly talking to people with the money and hosting big fundraisers and things like this. Candidates knock on doors, go to community events, talk to people on the ground. It's a more grassroots type campaign, so they're more engaged with their constituents. It expands civic engagement involvement from people that live in that district, in that municipality, because it puts vouchers and directly into their hands where they can decide what they want to do with that money, especially people that have never been able to donate before. They actually have some say in how that money gets spent. So it's more direct democracy type program. It empowers small donors and everyday citizens to be able to participate. We've also seen an increase in voter turnout where people that participate in this program. For example, there was a study done with the Seattle Voucher Program, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in just a bit, is low propensity in first-time voters that gave a voucher to someone were way more likely to actually vote in the election. So if you participate and you have an investment in it, you're more likely to actually vote. So it's increasing voter turnout, and it increases accountability to constituents because you're taking money directly from the people. They're giving you their vouchers or their small donor matching funds. That increases accountability to the constituents, and we think it's a way to help combat corruption in politics because of that type of accountability. So, brief history of public funding in Washington. Back in the 1980s, public funding was adopted in both Seattle and King County. It was more of a small donor matching type fund, I believe, and I forget all the details about it, but we did have public funding in the state back in the 80s. Unfortunately, in 1992, there was Initiative 134 that passed. It had quite a few reforms in it, but one of the reforms that were tagged onto it was that it prohibited public funding in all Washington elections. So it got rid of public funding in elections. It took quite a while until 2008 when Senate Bill 5278 passed, removing that prohibition. In fact, Fixed Democracy First used to be called Washington Public Campaigns, that came together for the purpose of reversing this law that prohibited public funding in Washington state elections. So we eventually changed our name back in 2014 after this bill passed to Fixed Democracy First to work on more reforms. But the organization originally started to remove that barrier. And then this opened the door to people and groups looking at public funding again in elections. So in 2015, Seattle Initiative 122 passed, creating the first of its kind democracy voucher program. There was also an attempt in 2016 to get this statewide on ballot initiative. This was a statewide ballot initiative 1464, but that did not pass. And there were a lot of reasons we think that did not pass. There were a lot of lessons learned, but unfortunately it didn't pass. And so we've only had public funding in the city of Seattle and Washington so far. So the Seattle Voucher Program, what that is, and some of you that live in Seattle may have participated in this program, but every eligible resident receives 4 $25 vouchers that you can give to any candidate of your choice. That's for mayor, city council, or city attorney races. That includes every legal resident, which means green card holders are eligible to use the vouchers. So currently, anybody that's allowed to donate to a campaign are eligible for the vouchers. So these are federal and state regulations that allow anybody that's a legal resident can use these voucher systems. And here's a couple of the flyers that went out in the first 2 campaigns. Seattle only has odd year elections, so the cycle of using vouchers has happened in 2017, 2019, and 2021. I was on the advisory council in the 2019 cycle. So its first cycle was 2017. It launched in under 10 months in 15 languages. The voucher users, after just that first year, were a lot more economically diverse and increased the number of Seattle contributors by 300%. It's up to over 700% now increase. So we have a lot more people participating in elections by using the voucher system, and over $1 million in campaign funds were distributed that first year. By the time 2019 came about, more than 38,000 residents turned in over 147,000 vouchers, 3.68 million was distributed to 35 qualifying candidates. So it went from some candidates experimenting and using it to pretty much all candidates in Seattle started using the program. It also, in 2019, we created a new online portal in 15 languages used by over 6,200 residents, and that continues to grow. So the online portal has been really helpful in spreading the word about it. And then in 2021 was the first year that mayoral candidates could participate in the program. The program is funded by a property tax. It's a very small property tax that the voters agreed to back in 2015. And so the coffers had to build a little bit with that tax in order to be able to allow mayoral candidates to use the program. Over 48,000 residents in Seattle used it. Over almost 185,000 of democracy vouchers were used. Participation reached an all-time high of 7.59%, with the largest gains in participation among people of color, younger and lower income voters. That may not seem like a huge amount, but it was something like about less than 2% of people were actually donating to elections before the voucher program. So we can see that continuing to grow. So we're talking about now it increased about 700% from the very beginning. The other thing that's really important to know about the Seattle voucher program is it has to be renewed by Seattle voters every 10 years. So it's going to come up for another vote in 2025, where the voters of Seattle want to continue the program or not. So who's using public funding in the United States? Well, all kinds of states and municipalities are using it all over the place. As I mentioned before, most places use a small donor matching program, and then you have the grant program. And then Seattle First Voucher Program is the only place still in the country using that. But Oakland, California, just this past November, voted to institute a democracy voucher program. I think they're calling it democracy dollars. So some places you might hear democracy dollars, things like that. But it's a voucher type program. So Oakland will be able to implement that shortly. So it's being used in quite a few areas, and other places are looking to expand a voucher program, especially in California. There's several cities that are looking to do it. San Francisco, LA, San Jose. There's other states right now looking at it, Minnesota. Maine is using a different type of program. New York City just implemented a matching type program. So more and more places are looking to use public funding of elections. And the one reason why is I mentioned Citizens United and those other decisions, we're very limited in what we can do for campaign finance reform. Disclosure is still been okay by the courts. Washington State has probably some of the best disclosure and campaign finance transparency rules in the entire country. Public funding is the other thing that we can do. So that's really important that we continue those type of reforms. So what's next here in Washington State? We started the People Powered Elections Washington Coalition just in this past year. Fixed Democracy First, League of Women Voters of Washington, Washington Bus, Washington Community Alliance, and several other organizations, Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle, and others have joined this, Northwest Progressive Institute. And we're starting to build this coalition to work on campaign finance reform, because for a long time, it was just Fixed Democracy First and the League of Women Voters that were only interested in campaign finance reform. But now we're bringing on other groups, and that's what we're doing through the People Powered Elections Washington. It's a statewide, multiracial, multi-generational coalition that's going to be focusing on campaign finance reform to try to deal with the power imbalance here in Washington State with special interests and corporations and wealthy individuals. Our current focus is trying to expand the democracy voucher program statewide to legislative races. We did get a bill introduced this session House Bill 1755. It was sponsored by Representative Daria Farivar. Unfortunately, we were not able to get a public hearing in the House State Government and Tribal Relations Committee, so it's not moving forward this session. We're going to be starting all over again next year, so we're going to be doing a lot of education over this year to try to get legislators on board with this and try to get them interested. Unfortunately, when you try to regulate legislators, it's not easy to do. Let's just say that. They don't like change, especially, if it's working for them. And even though the Democrats in power, the current system works for them. They've been able to maintain power for a long time. So oftentimes they're reluctant to new changes like public funding of elections or ranked choice voting, proportional representation, or other types of reforms like that. So unfortunately, that's not that it's just an uphill battle anytime you try to change the rules that involve legislators. So you're welcome to reach out to me. That's my contact information. I'm going to stop here and just see if there's any quick questions, because I also, Carol asked me to talk about the Moore v. Harper Supreme Court case, and I do have a couple of slides to share for that at some point, but let's stop sharing that and see if there's any particular questions. I went through that fairly quickly because I know we don't have a lot of time, but I wanted to make sure we had time for questions.
I had a couple of questions. Why are green card holders allowed to use the vouchers?
Because green card holders are already eligible to donate to elections. So it enables that anybody that's already allowed to donate in our elections, that includes any legal resident, which is like green card holders, are able to use the vouchers. So that's already federal rules of who can donate to elections, which are any legal resident. So you don't have to be a registered voter to donate to elections in this country. You just have to be a legal resident. So anybody already eligible are eligible to use the vouchers.
So people who are undocumented or whatever are not allowed, or they will not be getting them, only if they have verification of being a legal resident.
Correct. Yes. So undocumented persons that are not recognized as a legal resident are not eligible to donate to campaigns, so would not be eligible to use vouchers. Okay,
well, thanks, because we just heard from somebody on the national level that only Americans should vote in American elections or something along that line. And I was wondering, I just wanted to be real clear about this because so these are things they're going to be.
Well, currently you do have to be a U.S. Citizen to vote, but you only have to be a legal resident to donate.
Exactly. And I think that's maybe part of the thing that's not being said. Okay, so I just wanted to have that really clear in my mind. Thank you. And Lee has a question. Go ahead, Lee.
Cindy, I was trying to keep up with the slides and the chat, and I'm sorry I missed it, but just basically, how many vouchers did Seattle, if you know, how many vouchers did Seattle hand out, and how many were actually contributed?
Well, how many vouchers? I had this, I just closed my slide. In this last election, I believe it was over. Let me pull up my slide again to how it works is that anybody's eligible. They mail out the $425 vouchers to all people that are registered to vote. So if you're a legal resident, you don't actually get them mailed out to you. You have to request them through the online portal or call or things like that. So they don't mail them out to everybody, but everybody is eligible to use them. So for example, in the 2021, which was the last one, about 184,747 democracy vouchers were actually used, which is and not everybody gave all their vouchers out. So some people might have only given 1 or 2 or 3. It depends. Some might have only given like 1. And so almost 7.6% of eligible people in Seattle actually handed out any vouchers to anybody.
Okay, thank you.
And there's another question from Laura. What is the downside for candidates? And I know we have a couple of people who actually have run for office, maybe some that I'm not even aware of, but I wondered if, if they cared to identify themselves and speak to this, how they would feel about that, or if it'd be something that would have been used in their campaigns or not used.
So the question is, what's the downside for candidates in using their vouchers? Well, it's an optional program. You don't have to participate in it. That's one thing. It's totally optional. Some candidates choose not to because they know they can raise more money. An example would be Shama Sawant. Decided not to use the voucher system in her last system because she knew she was going to be able to get more money from national groups, socialist groups and things like that.
So there's a ceiling. If you go to the voucher, there's a ceiling on how
Yeah,
much you can
and also-
raise and other. Okay.
Yeah, so there are limits. So for example, there's also ways to raise that limit. So say, and this is mostly happens in the general election, once they get past the primaries, if your candidate who's not participating in the voucher program, and you're still allowed to bring in other money, but it is limits, and it has to be a certain amount of what that limit is based on your race, whether it's a city council race or a mayoral race. There's higher limits in mayoral races, and there's higher limits in the at-large positions versus the individual district positions. So if your candidate is not using the voucher program and raises way more money, your limit is lifted a little bit to be able to stay competitive in that race. That mostly happens during the general election race after the primaries. Nobody usually gets to that maximum in the primaries. And there's also some things that the Seattle Ethics and Elections Commission oversees the program, and they change some of the rules along the way and adjust if there show problems. There was somebody that one candidate that was paying someone to go and get vouchers from people. Well, now they put a bunch of limits on that where you can't pay someone to go and collect vouchers for you anymore. So sometimes, people try to test the system, see what they can do, and then the Seattle Ethics and Elections Commission will adjust the rules to make sure that it stays within common sense and people aren't abusing or manipulating the program in any way.
Interesting. There's another question, Cindy. As the fund builds equity, if it is building equity, will the amount people can donate increase? So are they going to grow?
It's possible, and that may be to inflation, other things like that. They may raise they probably won't raise the amount of vouchers, but they like 4 vouchers, but they may raise it to 30 at some point, depending on inflation and things like that. We know the PDC has been doing that with raising limits along the way for inflationary purposes to stay competitive. So at some point, the commission may decide to do some of that, but probably not before, in the next couple of cycles anyway. It doesn't look like it. And the equity too is built up because as more people use the program, they want to make sure they have more funds in there to do that. Right now, if everybody in Seattle used all 24 vouchers, they wouldn't have enough money to cover that. They're not expecting everybody to use the program every time. That's just probably not going to happen. But if that money builds up, they're going to keep that money in there because they do want more people to use it. So they want to make sure there's enough funding in there to cover that when that happens.
Good. Okay. I don't know that I see any other questions. Oh, I just wondered, the online portal, is it used just for information, or is there a way that vouchers can be printed from that, or is it just information?
You can request vouchers from the online portal. You can assign vouchers to a candidate through the online portal. They just have to verify signature and things like that, just like any other type of document, like a vote or a ballot. They still need to verify that you're a legal resident, verify your signature, keep track of all that, because it's all public knowledge. And it all has to be reported to the Public Disclosure Commission.
Okay, thank you. So I think that wraps it up for democracy vouchers. And I am curious, wait, there's one more question coming in. Oh, so Doris, and I mentioned this, she ran for office some years ago. She never had the money to run a campaign. There's Doris. Unmute yourself, Doris, and tell us.
Well, I'm just saying, you know, I was very new to anything in politics when I ran for local elections in Skagit County. And then I ran for rep one time from LD10. And I know I was a teacher. I never really had the money to run a campaign, and I was like way outspent from get-go. So, you know, this kind of program could help people that are starting out if they already have some base to pull for people that are going to contribute their vouchers. So it's just part of the whole mix of having a successful campaign. I mean, I think, you know, public funding is a great idea for people, you know, who are who do not have the capital to just put their private money into it to the extent that it costs to actually win an election.
Yeah, excellent point. The other thing too, I didn't mention earlier, but candidates have to get so many small donations, like 150 small donations, to show they're a viable candidate and there's actual support from them. So you couldn't just say, hey, I want to collect the voucher money and run a campaign without doing some legwork first to at least show you're a viable candidate.
No room for George Santos? Oh.
Well, we won't get
Don't
into
go
that.
there.
Yeah, we won't go there. So I know you wanted me to talk about Moore v. Harper real quick, so let me jump into that. I have just a few slides because the Moore v. Harper case is all about something called the independent state legislature theory. So you can't talk about Moore v. Harper without talking about this first. So this is, quote, a doctrine is a subjective reading of Articles 1 and 2 of the Constitution. Together, these articles state that federal congressional elections in the process of selecting presidential candidates shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof. So they've taken this statement and interpreted it in a way to mean that the legislature literally has exclusive control over the state's lawmaking representative body and complete control over how elections are won, eliminating power of state courts, the executive branch. So the reason why we have three branches of government, executive, judicial, and legislative, is that we have some oversight and checks and balance. With this independent state legislature theory, it's arguing, these people, that they want to give that complete control to state legislatures when it comes to elections. So where did it come from? It really started just back in 2000 with the Bush v. Gore campaign. Chief Justice Rehnquist wrote an opinion proposing a version of the independent state legislature theory. He argued the Constitution's assignment of the elections authority to state legislatures diminishes the state judge's power to alter the general coherence of legislative theme. So didn't go anywhere. And then 15 years later, the idea was resurrected as part of an effort to dismantle Arizona's independent redistricting commission. The Supreme Court at the time rejected the theory and let the commission continue its work. But again, it keeps creeping its ugly head out. After the 2020 election, Trump and his allies tried to use this legislative theory as part of their effort to overturn the results of the election. Again, the Supreme Court declined to adopt it, but three sitting justices, Thomas, Alito, and Gorsuch, endorsed it. So here you have a more conservative court that is willing to more embrace this concept. So hence now we have Moore v. Harper. So this is a Supreme Court decision or a case. They heard actually open arguments just back in December 7th. It concerns this independent state legislature theory, which says that state legislators alone are empowered by the Constitution to regulate federal elections without the oversight of state courts. Also, governors wouldn't be able to veto, like say you drew gerrymandered maps, and you have control by the legislature, but the governor has to sign off. This would remove their power as well. So this case would determine whether the North Carolina Supreme Court had the power to rein in the North Carolina's General Assembly's partisan gerrymander of the state's congressional districts. What's interesting about this case is that right now in North Carolina, their judicial balance on the state court has changed a little bit. It was definitely a little bit more to the left. Now it's definitely more to the right. So they're going to rehear cases that the state court had already said this was a gerrymandered map. And so they're bringing that back, trying to bring it back to the state court, which is more conservative now in North Carolina, to reverse what the previous court has already decided, which would have, we're not sure now what impact that might have on Moore v. Harper. Would it make a difference or not? We don't know. This could have a lot of implications in our elections overall. Congress does have power to prevent this. The Elections Clause in Article 1 authorizes Congress to override any state's policies about congressional elections which it disagrees with. But the makeup of Congress right now, it's very unlikely they're going to agree on anything. What are the possible impacts of the independent state legislature theory? Legislators could enact rules that run afoul of the state's constitution, voter passed initiatives, governor's veto, bypass the court. So anything that's even in the state constitution could get reversed with this. It would give state legislators wide authority to gerrymander electoral maps, pass voter suppression laws, other type of electoral reforms. It could impact how they distributed electoral votes during a presidential election. It limits the power of election officials, secretaries of states. And so it could have a lot of huge impacts on democracy. I did listen to all the opening arguments on December 7th about that. What was interesting about that, there was a lot of questions by some of the conservative courts as well. Word on the and we won't have a decision from this probably till June. This is one of those hot button issues like the Dobbs decision last year. They may hear arguments for the case early on in their session, but they're not going to make a decision until before they go on summer recess, which will be in June. So we won't know the results of this case until June. It's the talk of what's been going around is that we don't think that the court is going to fully adopt this independent state legislature theory, but they may do something like, you can take a state court's decision and force them to have a review by the Supreme Court. So take power away from the state's courts to give it to the Supreme Court. That's one outcome that might happen on this. So let me stop sharing here. But it's not easy to figure out what's going to go on with this. Again, it didn't seem like the arguments, and when I've gone to several presentations about that since, it seems like there's not the votes on the court to make the decision go completely to independent state legislative theory. There's probably going to be some version of it where it takes power away from state courts in some way. We just don't know what that's going to look like, and we won't know until June.
That's going to be a nail biter, though, I think. Yeah,
well, if you think, some people think it's going to be right up there with like the Citizens United decision, the impact it will have on our elections. Some think it might be even worse than that. But again, it's a real hot button issue, and the makeup of the court right now is in such as that some of these, in the past, I don't think a decision or a case like this would even have brought up to the court. They would have said, no, we're going to honor the lower court's decisions. That's up to the lower court. We're going to leave it to them and move on. The fact that they even decided to hear that case says that they're probably going to take some type of action and maybe limit the power of state courts and, you know, kind of elevate the power of legislators. So if you have a state like Washington, it may not be as big of an issue, but as if power changes in a state, as it often does between the different parties, from, you know, session to session, you may get, you know, or, you know, depending on the makeup of your state legislature, it could change back and forth. It's not a healthy decision, because we have checks and balances for a reason. We have state courts, we have state constitutions, we have an executive branch that balances out the power. At least we hope to some extent. Our court should be fair and impartial. And unfortunately, we're not seeing that as much anymore. We're seeing more political courts, and that's not good for democracy. Let's just say that.
Thanks so much. Any questions about that? Or I think Cindy really laid it out there for us. I think it's going to be something to, I don't know, look forward to in a way. I mean, in a kind of a nervous sort of way. But thank you so much for addressing that as well today, Cindy. Lots of good information. And I want to also thank Sherry for her discussion of those very important actions that we can now take. And I'd like to urge you to consider at least signing up on that form that Cindy has. You can just sign up to attend the meetings. You could also do more than that. But if you want to just kind of listen in and learn about proportional representation and multi-member districts, and hear different perspectives and what different leagues or different parts of the country are doing to promote this that we want to promote here in Washington State, sign up and just, you know, kind of follow along. You don't have to do anything more than just listen. Okay, so 3 new messages. Okay, let's see. So there's just some more sign in pro. Let's see. No, okay. I don't think we have any more questions. So I think we're probably ready to sign out, and I hope I see you next week when we have the green team with us. Yeah, right. Sure. This is sign language for clapping and whatever. So nice to see all of you. Thank you so much for joining in this morning, and we'll see you next week then.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.